A 23-mile road connects three of the most historic towns in America: Jamestown, Williamsburg, Yorktown. Tourists drive it for the scenery. In the 1980s, teenagers parked on it to be alone, and for 3 years, something walked that road-hunting couples. 4 times, 8 victims, 2 of them never found. One killer who didn't just murder them, he strangled one woman, slit her throat, then poured diesel fuel over her body and set it on fire while she was still inside her car. He shot a 14-year-old girl execution style in the back of the head. He made 2 more vanish so completely their bodies were never found. And for 37 years, he got away with it, until his own DNA, pulled off him after he was already dead, finally spoke for the dead. This is the story of the Colonial Parkway Murders. The Colonial Parkway isn't the kind of road you'd expect a serial killer to use as hunting ground. It's federal land, managed by the National Park Service, built to link 3 of the birthplaces of America, Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown, through 23 miles of quiet forest and river overlooks. No billboards, no gas stations, just trees, water, and long stretches where a car can pull off and disappear from the road entirely. That's exactly why it became a lover's lane. And that's exactly why, between 1986 and 1989, it became a hunting ground. On the evening of October 12, 1986, a jogger near the York River spotted something wrong. A small white car wedged into the brush at the water's edge, pushed down an embankment out of sight of passing traffic. Inside were Cathleen Thomas, a 27-year-old Naval Academy graduate, and Rebecca Dowski, a 21-year-old senior at William and Mary. Both women had been strangled. Both had their throats cut. Then the killer had done something almost theatrical. He doused their bodies in the car in diesel fuel. The fire never fully caught, but the intent was clear: destroy the evidence and the victims entirely. It didn't work. What it did was announce to anyone paying attention that this was not a robbery gone wrong. Investigators had no answers. There was no obvious connection between the killer and the victims, no witnesses, no motive. The case went cold within weeks. 11 months later, on September 20th, 1987, 2 teenagers made plans that never got finished. David Knobling, 20, and Robin Edwards, just 14 years old, had spent the evening with friends at a movie and an arcade before driving across the James River Bridge to a secluded spot at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge. 3 days later, their bodies washed ashore, roughly 100 feet apart. Both had been shot. Edwards was killed execution style, a single round to the back of the head. Knobling had been shot twice. Their truck, like the car before it, was gone, moved by whoever had killed them, as if the killer needed a few more hours before anyone came looking. 2 double homicides, less than a year apart, both involving young couples parked in remote areas along the same corridor. Investigators started using a word they hadn't wanted to say out loud: serial. Then, in April 1988, the case took a turn that made it even harder to solve. Cassandra Hailey, 18, and Richard Keith Call, 20, left a party together and were never seen again. Their car was recovered near the same overlook where Thomas and Dowski had been murdered. No bodies, no forensic trail, no explanation. To this day, neither of them has been found. Whatever happened to them happened somewhere the killer chose, and he chose it well enough that nearly 4 decades of searching has turned up nothing. The 4th attack came on Labor Day weekend, 1989. Annamaria Phelps, 18, and Daniel Lauer, 21, weren't a couple. Phelps was dating Lauer's younger brother, and the two had simply driven together to visit family. On their way back to Virginia Beach, they vanished. Their car was found abandoned at a rest stop off Interstate 64, but parked facing the wrong direction on the westbound side, opposite the way they'd actually been traveling. Someone had moved it there deliberately, staged it to look like it had simply been left. 6 weeks later, hunters found their remains in the woods off a logging road nearly a mile away, wrapped together in a blanket that had come from Lauer's own car. Decomposition was too advanced to determine an exact cause of death, though investigators noted what appeared to be stab wounds. The state police theory, built years later from the scene itself, was chilling in its precision. The killer had walked the victims into the woods himself, killed them there, then gone back for the blanket to cover the bodies, and returned a third time to stage the car. Someone hanging around a crime scene for that long, making that many trips, wasn't panicking. He was in control the entire time. 4 attacks, 8 victims, 1 road, and for over 3 decades, no arrest. The investigation itself became a case study in how jurisdiction can work against justice. Because the Parkway is federal property, some of the murders fell under FBI authority, while others, occurring just off Park Service land, belonged to Virginia State Police and local departments. 2 agencies, 2 evidence trails, 2 sets of files that didn't always talk to each other in the years before shared databases existed. Early evidence handling didn't help either. Park rangers were first on scene for more than one of the murders, and in at least one case entered the victim's vehicle and moved items before investigators trained in homicide work ever arrived. Whatever contamination happened in those first hours may have cost the case leads that could never be recovered. Tips poured in for decades, names surfaced and were cleared. A retired Milwaukee homicide detective took an independent interest in the case in 2010, digging through old files and pushing state police to reopen searches along the Parkway. Documentaries, message boards, and amateur investigators kept the case alive online long after most official resources had moved elsewhere. And the families of the victims spent literal decades pushing for answers, giving interviews, funding private investigations, meeting with new generations of detectives, refusing to let the case quietly disappear the way 2 of the victims already had. One detail that stayed with investigators for years. In Annamaria Phelps's belongings, her family later found a handwritten note referencing plans to meet someone in a blue van the night she disappeared, a lead that was never fully run down at the time. The break, when it finally came, didn't come from a tip or a confession. It came from a dead man's blood. In January 2024, Virginia State Police announced that DNA evidence had identified a suspect, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., a Northern Neck waterman who had died of natural causes back in 2017. Because Wilmer had never been convicted of a felony, his DNA had never entered any law enforcement database, which meant that for years the answer to one of Virginia's most notorious cold cases had simply never been checked against the evidence. It took new forensic genealogy techniques and investigators legally obtaining a DNA sample after his death to make the match. Wilmer was conclusively linked to the murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards and connected to the 1989 killing of a woman named Teresa Howell in a separate but related case. 2 of the victims had been sexually assaulted. Then, in January 2026, the case widened again. The FBI Norfolk Field Office announced that new forensic work had conclusively linked Wilmer to the very first attack, the murders of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski back in 1986. His confirmed victim count climbed to at least 6. Investigators have said that had Wilmer still been alive, the evidence gathered would have supported a federal prosecution. He died never knowing, or perhaps knowing exactly, that he would never face a courtroom for what he'd done. 2 cases remain unresolved. Cassandra, Hailey, and Richard Call are still missing 38 years later, with no bodies ever recovered. Annamaria Phelps and Daniel Lauer's case has not been officially attributed to Wilmer, though investigators continue to examine possible links between all 4 attacks. The families of Hailey and Call have said the recent breakthroughs give them something they'd nearly given up on: hope that DNA technology might one day tell them exactly where and how their loved ones died. What makes Wilmer's case so unsettling isn't just that he evaded capture for decades. It's how ordinary he was, a local fisherman. No felony convictions to place him in a database. He worked the same waters day after day for years after his last known killing and died in 2017 without a single person publicly suspecting what he'd done. He didn't run. He didn't need to. The system built to catch him only worked on people who had already been caught for something else, and Wilmer never gave it the chance. The only reason anyone knows his name today is that death doesn't erase DNA, and that somewhere, decades later, a lab technician finally had cause to test it. It raises the question every investigator on this case has had to sit with. How many other Alan Wilmers are out there right now? Men with no record, no red flags, living ordinary lives in ordinary towns, whose DNA has simply never been asked the right question. Forensic genealogy didn't exist in 1986. It barely existed in 2017 when Wilmer died. The technology finally caught up to him 7 years too late for justice, but not too late for the truth. For nearly 40 years, the Colonial Parkway carried tourists past the exact overlooks where 4 couples were murdered, most of them never knowing. The road looks the same today as it did in 1986, quiet, scenic, historic. It's only when you know what happened there that the silence starts to feel different.